Well, welcome in. Brett, great to have you today.
Good to be here.
We're going to give it just a few extra seconds to let everybody filter in from the waiting room into the webinar here, and then we'll get started.
All right.
All right, so we're going to go ahead and kick this thing off. Hopefully everybody is able to hear us well. First and foremost, thank you everybody for joining 2025's first Lunch and Learn with Brett Campbell. For those that are not familiar with Brett, he is our instructor for the PDP program, and I know that he will dive into that a little bit more during his presentation today. But for those who do not know Brett, he's originally from Philly. We will not hold that against him, but he currently lives in Atlanta, Georgia. He serves as a master trainer with Dale Carnegie, and Brett facilitates training across a broad range of industries, provides leadership coaching, and prepares future trainers for Dale Carnegie certification. So with that being said, I'm going to hand it over to Brett. But before I do that, I want you guys to meet Dallas. He's also on the call, and with me terming out of my seat for FLN, Dallas will be taking over the Lunch and Learn moving forward. So, Dallas, welcome aboard, and Brett, go ahead and take it away.
Hey, thank you, Jonathan. Dallas. It is a privilege to be on this webinar because it's been a great privilege for me to be part of SEMA and working with FLN. And Jonathan mentioned the PDP coming up in the spring. That is a Dale Carnegie course, and it's highly engaging, very useful. You walk out the door and immediately you can apply those things. So if you want to know anything about it, just ask one of your colleagues who has already been there. And I hope to see many of you this spring. I think applications are about to open for that. So we're going to talk about leadership today, and I'm going to begin by sharing my screen with you.
Hey, Brett, before you get started, I did forget one thing that I wanted to mention, and that is that we're going to hold some time at the very end for a Q&A. I did open the chat up. I see a lot of comments, people just saying hello. But if you have a question for Brett, if it's something that we feel is a good thing to stop Brett at that time and address the question, we will. Otherwise, we'll hold them to the end. But again, if you have any questions, drop them in the Q&A, and at the very end, Brett will answer those for you guys.
So I'm probably stating the obvious when I say that strong leadership is critical to any organization's sustained success. Nobody wants to be a flash in the pan, or to go historical for a minute. Nobody wants to be a .com that starts off really good, big bang, and a while later it's not happening anymore, or it's a has-been company. And that's why leadership is such a key. How do we weather the storms of a fluctuating economy and the labor force? So how do we deal with retention? How do we get through all that and 10 years from now, 15 years from now, still be growing and profitable? Well, we would submit to you that a major part of that answer is leadership. And so today we're looking at leadership that builds. John Maxwell makes this comment in regard to leadership. He says the single biggest way to impact an organization is to focus on leadership development. There's almost no limit to the potential of an organization that recruits good people, raises them up as leaders, and continually develops them. So what's the big idea? What's the essence of our time on this webinar? We might say it this way. When leaders tenaciously develop themselves, their people, and their organizations, the impact is undeniable. These are leaders that make a difference. We want to be leaders that make a difference. We want to be leaders that build. So when we're thinking about some of the attributes or aspects of effective leaders, we have to ask, what's the focus? We can't focus on everything. We can't cover everything. So if we're talking about leadership in our own development and others, then there are 3 areas that we need to focus on. And this is what we'll focus on today in this webinar. And as effective leaders, our focus is on our personal development, it's on our people's development, and it's our productivity as an organization. And those follow in a particular sequence. It's a natural and logical flow, right? We have to begin with ourselves, but we're going somewhere. We're building ourselves, we're building our teams for a reason, and that is we're part of organizations. We want to be profitable. We want a greater market share. We want to have greater influence. There is the issue of productivity. But if we try to jump straight to productivity, crack the whip and say, hey, do better, it's probably not going to work. Many of us have worked for people, regrettably, who that was their approach to leadership. You do it because I said so, or you're fired. Or the motivating speech was, if you guys work really hard, we're going to win some awards this year. Okay, that's pretty vanilla. We've got to put some substance in there. And that goes back to, how are we developing? How are our people developing? So let's start with our own personal development. When we think about leadership and growing as leaders, we have to ask a question that is often so easily overlooked, almost as if it's inconsequential. We just go straight into the, I'm leading. Here's what I'm going to do to lead. We skip a very important question, and it's a simple one. If you're familiar with Simon Sinek's book, Know Your Why, I can fully recommend that book to you, because Sinek gets at the critical importance of asking before anything else, why do I want to be a leader? Think about it even now, we're on the call. Why do you want to be a leader? People will answer that in a variety of ways. I want to be a leader because leaders get paid more. So our why for leadership is we want to make more money. And by the way, I'm not saying that in any kind of disparaging way. I'm saying that in a morally neutral way. But that's a reason. I want to make more money. Or we say, why do I want to be a leader? I want the prestige of being a leader, right? There's one thing to be an individual contributor, but when you have your name on the org chart, that's impressive. I want to be a leader because of that. Or maybe you say, I want to be a leader because I want to develop people. I want to influence people. That's a good reason. The point is, we've got to answer that question. And it doesn't necessarily take deep soul searching. You might know it right now. But sometimes it does require that we go off someplace and get somewhere quiet and think about our life, and then think about this specific aspect of leadership. Because that why will drive everything else. So we've answered that question. Why do I want to be a leader? Now we can get to the what. And there are two whats, if you will, that we'll look at here. And the first is, what are our core values? What's important to us? And just think again for a second. Think about values. That term has been thrown around through the years, very similar to that. I'm going to date myself, but William Bennett years ago wrote a book called Book of Virtues, and it was a huge success because people wanted to believe in something. They wanted to consider what matters to me, what doesn't matter to me, what should I be passing on. So our values are those things that are at the heart and soul of who we are. The Cambridge Dictionary, it defines values as the beliefs people have, especially about what's right and what's wrong, and what is most important in life, and that controls their behavior. Our values, whether we can name them or not, they control how we act. If you ever wonder what someone's values are, maybe, one way to get a feel for it is look at their calendar and look at their checkbook. Now, they're probably not going to let you look at their checkbook, but you look at those two items. Those two items will be an expression of what's important to somebody. What we do with our time, how we spend our money, that's an expression of our values. We have to bring it into this issue of leadership. What do our values have to do with leadership? Well, take for one example, I value getting work done. I might not value people as much. They're just how we get the work done. But I have a high, strong work ethic. Okay, that work ethic is going to show up in my leadership. And if you're on the people side, and I primarily value work and not as much the actual team members, you're going to feel that distance from me. That value is shaping how I lead. Years ago, I worked for a boss, and we were having a conversation one day about this whole topic of values. And he said, listen, Brett, when I need to use my values, I reach in my drawer over here, I pull them out, and I use them for whatever I need to. And then when I'm done, I stick them back in my drawer and I get on with life. What my friend was saying is that his values don't really flesh out in real life. But the misunderstanding there is they really do, whether we acknowledge it or not. The way we know that something's a value is we will behave consistent with that value, even if it costs us something. If we value integrity and we've made a mistake with a client, maybe a mistake that's going to cost us 50 grand to fix, and we realize the client doesn't know we made that mistake, they'll just think it's part of the invoice. But if we value integrity, we'll eat that 50,000 and we'll tell the client, this is the mistake we made and this is how we're fixing it. So one example of values, I'll show you, these are my personal values. Love, integrity, passion, service, and learning. Those values find expression in my life, both personally and professionally. Just one example, I'm passionate about helping people. I'm on this webinar call today because I'm passionate about equipping people. It influences how I lead. But at home, I'm also passionate about music. So if you looked at my Spotify list and you say, well, what genre, what's your favorite music? You'd see all kinds of genres because I love all kinds of music. Those are things that I value. In terms of how I engage people in my franchise who may need help with something, well, I value serving others. And so that value gets expressed in how I engage them and also, of course, how I would lead. All right, so we can drive this home. I realize we have limited time here and we don't really have any interaction here, but right at this moment, we'll take 30 seconds and just give thought to one or two of your values. 30 seconds, write it down somewhere where you can tell somebody when this webinar is over that was one of your values come up. 30 seconds, think about your values. All right, so we've identified our first what. What are our values as leaders? Now we need to look at our second what, and that is, what are the competencies that we need to focus on so that we can be more effective leaders? We can think of it in realms, and those realms will be somewhat general until we make them specific to ourselves. And then some of those competencies will be specific to whatever particular role we have. If you're running a shop, there are certain competencies that are specific to that. If you're the purchasing manager, there are competencies that are specific to that. So those are the specific ones. For our purposes here, we want to get at some of the big headings. Now, when you think about competencies, no doubt, this is not the first time you've heard this term. So you can find all kinds of lists from all different types of organizations. Even at Dale Carnegie, in our leadership development courses, we have two sets of competencies that we list out. So what we'll do here is we'll just give you an abbreviated list. This is a suggestion of things that we need to be competent in if we're going to be a leader that builds. So the first is communication. We think about how skilled are we in communication? Now, we're not talking about do we have the ability to talk? We probably do. We probably have the ability to talk. That's not what we're getting at. When we think about communication skills, we're thinking about how do we say things? Are we verbose? Do we talk a lot? We've all been in that meeting where either the leader or an individual at the table, they start to talk and they are, for the next 10 minutes, they're gone. They've covered everything from the founding of our country to what this company is about to where they went on vacation last year. You have no idea what this person's talking about. Somewhere in there, there's a point we think, right? What does that do? That we tune that person out, right? We go to our happy place until we figure out that they're finished. Okay, so that's a communication skill that needs to be honed significantly. How can we be more brief and to the point? Are we gruff in the way we communicate? Just matter of fact, this is how we talk to everybody. Don't take it personally. This is how I talk to all people. So quit your whining, right? That's a communication skill that probably needs to be adjusted. Or maybe we're able to communicate in a way that, for example, we leave pauses when we talk, which allows another person, the person we're talking to enter into the conversation. Do we even have conversations? Are they dialogues or they're monologues? Okay, unless you're on the Jimmy Kimmel show in the first 5 minutes doing the monologue, that's not what communication is about. So how do we do on that skill? People skills, absolutely critical for leaders. And we're in all different places, right? We feel comfortable around these people, but not so comfortable around those people. If someone gives pushback on us, we retreat, or our people skill is we dive right into that person and let them know why we don't agree. Those are people skills. When we're thinking about how we motivate people, do we motivate all people the same way? Or do we recognize that some people are motivated by this, but some people are motivated by that, and we have the ability to switch between the two? When we talk about time management, that again is obviously very important for a leader. And I'm aware that that term time management is entrenched in our vernacular, in our language. It's also really a misnomer. I mean, think about this. Imagine if I say to you, hey, do me a favor. Can you run out in the lobby real quick and grab me a Coke? When you come in, what am I expecting to see? I'm probably going to see a small can, which is, by the way, progressively been getting smaller through the decades. Maybe it's red and says Coca-Cola on it. You're holding it, you hand it to me, and I have it now. But what if I said, oh man, what time are we doing the webinar? Do me a favor, run out into the lobby, and can you grab me 10 minutes, please? You can't grab me 10 minutes. It's an abstract idea. In other words, time management, or excuse me, time is a construct that captures the sequence of our behavior. A better title for this would be life management. If you're on this webinar today, you manage your life today. You made choices today. You blocked out from 10:30 to 11:30 that you were going to do this because of some reason. You wanted to learn, you wanted to grow, you wanted to see more of SEMA people. You were making a life choice when you said from 10:30 to 11:30, I'm going to be on this call. That life choice was probably informed by your values and may be under the umbrella of your vision. That's life management, not time management. Vision casting, critical for a leader. Do we have a picture of the future? Can we paint that picture in such a way that it draws people in, that it draws us in? Can we articulate that vision? And then finally, emotional intelligence. Many of you, I'm sure, are familiar with this. It's been around, the term has been around most popularly since 1994. Daniel Goleman wrote a book. He didn't come up with emotional intelligence, but he wrote a bestseller. And when we're talking about leadership and emotional intelligence, we simply mean, do I have self-awareness? Do I know my triggers? Do I know my propensities? Do I know when something's happening in me? And then social awareness. Can I read the room? Can I tell if I make an announcement about next week's schedule and 4 people roll their eyes, do I see that? Do I know how to respond to that? Or am I oblivious to that? So emotional intelligence is a key part of leaders as well. So we've said our why, we've said what are our values, what are our competencies, and now we bring it all together. We bring it all together in vision. Specifically, we're talking about a personal vision. And this is where the vision formula, the vision formula comes into play. You've got values plus vision plus mission equals leadership. The vision is really the strategic, and the mission is the tactical. We're going to focus on that middle piece right now for our own leadership, specifically on vision. So we look at corporate visions just for a second. We'll go up to we'll do the 30,000 foot look just for a second. Amazon's vision: to be Earth's most customer-centric company, where customers can find and discover anything they might want to buy online, and endeavors to offer its customers the lowest possible prices. Listen to Amazon. Not to be North America's most customer-centric company, not to be Western Hemisphere, to be the Earth's most customer-centric company. Wow, that's a big vision. Now, you look at BMW, a little more short, a little more concise, but full of superlatives: to be the most successful, the most sustainable premium manufacturer for individual mobility. You see that those visions, they're lofty, they're big, as they should be for an organization. But here on the webinar, we want to bring that down to something that's actionable for us, and that brings us to a personal vision statement. So a personal vision statement has 3 key components. It's compelling, it's concise, and it's coachable. A personal vision statement, it ought to grab us. It ought to require something of us. It draws us in to something greater than ourselves. If I write a vision statement that can be accomplished next Friday, it's probably not that compelling. But a vision statement is meant to see us to see something almost transcendent. Here's where I am, but I'm going to be there. How am I going to get from here to there? It's going to take a lot of work. It's going to take a lot of effort. I'm going to be spent by the time I get to that vision. But when I get to that vision fulfilled, I will have a sense I've accomplished something. We can't ask people in our organizations to give 110% when our vision for them is flat, when we haven't given them anything to strive for or to live for. So when we talk about our own personal vision statement, it has to be compelling. It also has to be concise. You can go online, and as I did, and you can look at all kinds of vision statements for companies, and so many of them are great. I mean, they're rich, they're illustrative, they're transcendent. You think, wow, that's a great vision. And they're 2 to 3 paragraphs long. Now, here's the downside of that. Nobody remembers 2 and 3 paragraphs. So when we're talking about a vision statement that's functional, usable in our life, it needs to be concise so that we can remember it. It needs to be compelling. It needs to have action words and those kinds of things, but it also has to be concise. So that 3 weeks from now, if someone came up to us and said, hey, heard you're on that webinar and they did something about a personal vision statement, and you said you wrote one, what's your personal vision statement? And you can just rattle that thing off. It's making a difference in your life, partly because you can remember it. And then finally, it needs to be coachable. When we talk about a vision statement, it needs to be coachable in the sense that once we set that vision, can people around me help me? How will I know when I get to that vision statement, the fulfillment of that vision statement? Because if my vision statement is, my vision for 2025 is I want to be a really good trainer for Dale Carnegie. How are you going to coach me on that? Hey, come on, Brett, be Be more good. There's nothing to coach. But if I begin to put descriptors in there, I want to be dynamic. I want to be engaging. You can coach me on that. And you can measure me, and I can measure myself. How close am I to fulfilling a vision? What adjustments do I need to make? So an effective vision is compelling, concise, and coachable. Let's look at an example. Here's one. I just made this up, okay? So the initial, my vision is to run a clean shop that gets work done quickly and keeps the customers happy. Now, that's good. Clean shop is good. Not lazy in output. That's good. Customers happy. Sure. Those are good things. What if we tweaked it a little bit? Now you see that second one. It's 6 months from now, and I am a skilled shop manager who is processing a high volume of work while meeting project deadlines. I'm a dynamic leader who is effectively engaging and motivating a diverse group of specialists and technicians. I am directly influencing our reputation in the community as a standout body shop. Fuller, capture certain items, but not too long that you can't remember. That vision statement will require something of us if we're going to fulfill it. I'll give you another example. Now, this is my personal vision statement as a trainer with Dale Carnegie. It's 6 months from now. I'm a dynamic and engaging trainer who is regularly challenging individuals to break out of their comfort zones. I am personally coaching them for success in leadership, communication, and team building. As a master trainer, I am preparing candidates for trainer certification by clear instruction and vivid demonstration. By regularly contributing updates on trends and insights into the various industries we work with, I'm adding value to my franchise. That's enough that it covers my main areas of responsibility. It calls me to something, and it's coachable. So the question then is, how about you? Where are you headed? Take 30 seconds right now. You're not going to be able to write a personal vision statement, but take 30 seconds right now and just jot down a few adjectives that would describe who you want to be as a leader 6 months from now. 30 seconds. All right, so we've built this first foundation. Our focus is our personal development. Now we're in a position to move to that second focus, which is our people's development. And when we're talking about our people development, think about this. What's your leadership style? Is it transactional or is it relational? Transactional says the only time I talk to my team is when I need something from them or when I need to tell them that they messed up. Relational leadership says I talk to my people regularly because I want to know all kinds of things about them. I want to commend them when they're doing well. I want to coach them when they can improve. I want to hear about their summer vacation. I want to find out how their boy's doing in their t-ball or how their daughter's doing on the volleyball team. There's a relationship here. Relational leadership builds on a much broader base and oftentimes breeds loyalty. So what do we need to do when we're developing our people? Know, talk, develop. First, we say, well, how do I get to know my people? There are some ways that can answer that, some things that can answer that question. And first is just a gracious curiosity. We say gracious because what we're not talking about is some probing, trying to find out special things about someone's life because it's intriguing to us, or and no one's, by the way, going to be interested in telling you those things. If people are suspicious of why you're curious, they'll shut down. We're talking about a gracious curiosity. Hey, I just want to get to know you more. We're starting to work together now in this department, and I'm really curious to know this new. Hey, the guy's from Philly. Wow, I wonder if he's going to be talking about the Eagles between now and the Super Bowl. I'm curious. If we want to get to know our people, it has to be genuine. Authenticity is the key. And that's been really pushed to the fore in our culture, thankfully, say in the last 20 years or so. We're tired of the fake and the plastic, and we want to know things are real. We want to know people are real. So we have to have a genuine interest. And that takes some time, by the way. So if we've not engaged anybody regularly, and all of a sudden we come out of this webinar and we say, okay, from now on, I'm going to start engaging people. We just have to be prepared that the first one or two engagements, the person might be suspicious. And even more specifically, they might be thinking, okay, what do you want from me? You never talked to me. Now you're talking to me. Am I getting fired? So this is where authenticity is critical, and consistency. So we look for windows of opportunity. When can we engage? It might be 2 minutes. It might be 5 minutes. It might be for a meeting. It might be on a ride along. It might be walking through the plant. And we talk about non-business topics. I mean, just think about it like this. What do you know about your people that's not work-related? Again, we're not trying to pry. We're saying if we only know our people by the job that they do when they walk through those doors, then we don't really know them. And here's why that can be detrimental. Because the rest of who they are is influencing the person who's walking through those doors. So we've got to take time to know them. And we just gauge that. They'll let us know how far we can go. So we want to know our people. Next, we want to talk. And you think about, how do I talk to my people? And here we're breaking down this idea of communication more. Communication is a two-way activity. So many of us think it's one way. I talk, you listen. Especially if I'm the boss, I talk, you listen. But really, what research is continuing to show is that actually the more powerful part of relationship building when it comes to communication is the listening part. So how well do we do at listening? Are we hearing what our team members are saying, even though they're not directly saying it? How do we do with different person's communication style? Some people just want the facts. Please, I don't want to hear about your weekend and all that you did. Just get to the point. And so we honor them by doing that. And other people, they don't want to just have a factual conversation. They want some warmth there. Can we as leaders move between those two groups? And the more people we're able to engage and interact, the broader our impact for leadership will be. We sort of touched on this already with communication. We've got to be clear and concise. It doesn't mean that we're not saying something of substance. It just means we're not saying a lot. So if we can say something in 30 words, why would we take 500 words to say it? Think about, how do we talk with our people? And then finally, how do we develop them? How do we develop our people? And so this flows, the know, talk, develop, because if I'm getting to know my team members and we have a good rapport, then my team members are also telling me, I'm really looking at that management position probably next year. That's where I aspire to be. Or you know what, I know I'm in the parts department, but I'd really like to get into sales at some point. Okay, so we learned that in some previous conversation, and we know that as leaders, we know that. So when we want to develop that person, we might have a stretch assignment. We might have an opportunity for them that can take that interest that they have, match it up with our organization's needs, and they begin to develop. When we're talking about developing people, we need to think about resources. How are we providing them with the resources? That's not only throwing money at it, although if we say we really want to develop our people and their budget for their development is zero, then of course the genuineness of that is going to be a suspect. But there are other things we can do. We can have, like today, we can recommend they watch a webinar. We send them to a workshop. Bring them to the SEMA show. My gosh, in this industry, Bring them to the SEMA show. There's so much to do there, so many different workshops, as I'm sure many of you know have already been. But those things strategically placed in that person's development can really make a difference. And then finally, well, two more things here. Consider helping to find them a mentor. It might be us. In some cases, it needs to be us. When we think about our teams and our departments, is there a pipeline for leadership? Let's imagine we do really well, and the company says we're doing really well, so they promote us out of that department. But then they don't want to do that yet because there's nobody to come behind us because we didn't develop anybody. The next team leader where you're working right now is in your department, most likely right now. So how are you developing that person? And again, maybe it's not you. Maybe you assign a mentor to that person, but you're preparing for the future. Just like that vision says, this is where we're going. This is a step to say, this is where I'm going with my people. And then finally, delegate. Delegating is it's a strategic developmental tool. Sometimes the way delegation comes about is reactionary. We say, oh, man, I've got way too much. I can't get all this stuff. I need to delegate some of the stuff. Hey, you, come here. Hey, from now on, you're doing this. Okay, so your plate's gotten a little lighter. That person's plate has gotten a little heavier. They don't really have any idea why that's the case, but they just have to do it. That's not really going to develop them. When we're talking about delegation as a strategic tool, we have to put some thought into it. Where does this person want to go? Will this help them to get there? What are our needs? How can we develop this person here for this new department? Well, one of the ways we can do that is through delegation. And when we're delegating, we're not recusing ourselves from all responsibility, but we are giving them an opportunity to learn and grow and to demonstrate that they actually have the capabilities to do that. Oftentimes, the people with whom you've been delegating to end up being your leaders because they've shown themselves to be able to do that. Ultimately, a leader's effectiveness is judged not by his or her success, but rather by the success of those whom he or she is leading. Now, we could, for mercy's sake, say there is that rare case where we're an outstanding leader and our entire team is filled with people who just want to pull a mutiny or a coup. That's maybe 0.01%. It's never all, it's not typically all our fault if it's going well or I'm going poorly. But we do need to recognize if we're growing and our team isn't, then there's a disconnect. And the reason why is because leadership is never about us. It's never about us. We're leading to serve and develop others, to meet organizational goals. If we think we're leading and nobody's following us, we're just out for a walk. Leaders develop people. Leaders create leaders. So as we're developing, as we're learning things, as we're applying things, and we pass them on to our team, the whole thing rises. And we can think of individuals in our organizations who would say, oh my goodness, listen, you have got to get with so-and-so sometime in your career. There are probably 30 leaders in our company right now, and all 30 of them at one time or another passed through a department with so-and-so. And what did that person do? That person built. And now the company is the better for it. Well, as we get ready to shoot the approach and land our plane for today, we get to that final focus, and that is productivity in our organization. We're developing for a reason, not just so we can be better. There's things that we want to get done. We work for shops and companies and businesses that have real goals, and we're part of helping to reach those goals. So that must be in focus. Paul Meyer says, productivity is never an accident. It is always the result of a commitment to excellence, intelligent planning, and focused effort. Now, everything we've been saying up till now in this webinar is that statement right there. I'm committed to this, I'm thinking it through, and I'm applying effort. So when we look at leading our team, for example, these would be some things that we would need to be prepared to address because they come up. What do I do with performance? How do I deal with my team's performance? Do I do performance reviews? Do I do quarterly updates? Do I do monthly pulse checks? How am I handling that? Of course, a recommendation is not to wait till the annual performance review to identify for somebody areas you need to improve. Because at that point, so many of us go into a performance review already braced to not hear good news. And at that point, when you've put it to ink, you can't really change it. No doubt many of you don't do that. You do something like at least a quarterly or sometimes twice a year. And those can help. You do a halfway point, and now you've got 6 more months to improve. We want the person's success. We're not just trying to get rid of it. What do you do with culture? Leaders are culture creators. Do you realize that the realm in which you work, you are influencing the fragrance of that area? It either smells good and people say, man, I love coming to work. Y'all need to be on this team. This is the best team. Or they're saying, you know, gosh, is it 5 o'clock yet? I can't wait to get out of here. Now think of the opportunity. As leaders, we can impact a culture which will influence the motivation and productivity of our team and ultimately benefit organization. We think about things like alignment. Are our goals aligned? Are our personal goals aligned? Are our team goals aligned with the organization? What do you do with conflict resolution? That's going to draw on our self-awareness and our social awareness. How do we deal with change? Do we just come up with the idea and then just send out an email and tell everybody this is how it's going to be? Oftentimes, the reason why change doesn't go well is because it's executed too fast. And then finally, opposition. How do we deal with people who don't think the same way we think? You see, the way we address these things, they will either help or hinder us as we're endeavoring to build a winning team. So leaders who build, they focus on their personal development, their people's development, and the productivity of their organization. Abraham Maslow said it this way: you will either step forward into growth or you will step back into safety. We can stay back where it's safe, where we don't risk anything, where we live, as Teddy Roosevelt would say, that gray twilight of not really doing anything. Or we can be leaders who build and are willing to deliberately and intentionally step out into the pathway of growth and experience the exhilaration that comes from knowing we've made a difference in our life, our team's life, and our organization's life. Those are the leaders that build.
Thank you, Brett. We have some fantastic Q&As here that really kind of lead into some of what we left off with and some of things regarding vision. There's a lot of questions here, some of which are very similar. So, Brett, one thing here from Chris: what leadership strategies ensure that a company's vision remain relevant in an increasingly digital and decentralized market?
So there we're hitting on this topic of awareness and whether or not the environment we're creating has open windows or closed doors. And so strategically, companies will do something like once a quarter, they'll have a town hall. where those kinds of things can be discussed. On a smaller level, like a team, we as leaders can create that open door. I don't want to say policy because it sounds so clinical, but an open door where our team members feel comfortable in talking with us. And when we're talking about strategy, it really is going to go back to relational leadership, because I can say, hey, anytime you got some input, you've noticed something would make us better, come in and talk to me. And then when you come in and talk to me, I gave you all the reasons why that's not a good idea. That's not going to work. So we as leaders have to invite people's input. We have to hear that input. We have to not react in an adverse way. And in those cases where we're talking about relevancy, we might actually partner with that person to find out, well, how can we be more, what do you think we should change in this area, given, hey, you know what, there's potential tariffs in our country. That may affect supply chain. Let's partner together for how we can do that. When we create that environment where people feel comfortable to share, we expose ourselves to a wealth of knowledge and wisdom.
Excellent. Another question around vision that we had here from Evans was, are there any frameworks that organizations should use to ensure that their vision translates into actionable strategies with some measurable outcomes?
So we're bringing it from the 30,000 down to, is this really happening? And to be sure, there are, for example, there are channels of communication that you can get. It's kind of like we just talked about a minute ago. Is there a place where people can give feedback and whatnot? Just a very practical way that we can test a vision, especially for a leadership position. And I would say the higher up we are in the leadership change, the more this is beneficial, because at that level, we're oftentimes influencing directly the vision statement. And here's a strategy. It's not profound. It's simple. We go out to one of our team members. If we're in a shop, we go out in the shop floor. We ask the mechanic all the way in the back, hey, tell me about the vision of our company. That mechanic in the back bay better be able to tell you what the vision of the company is. Because if he can't, there's a breakdown somewhere. It's not reaching him. And if it's not reaching him, he's not being influenced by it. So that's a simple strategy. Talk to your people in a place where they feel safe to share, and find out how much of the vision they can tell you about.
Yeah. Then continuing on that trend with vision, Francis has a question here. How should companies incorporate customer feedback and emerging trends into their vision, but without losing focus on their core strategy?
I'm not sure how much of that would enter into the vision part as much as it might enter into the execution part. Part of our vision, probably a big part of our vision, is coming from the people who are actually executing. What do they think of? What do they dream of? Now, that's certainly going to be influenced by what they see out there. But part of a vision is taking people beyond where they are presently. So I think that information, in terms of from our customers, absolutely want customer feedback. I think that might come into some other place on more the tactical realm. How does our vision speak to this person's need? And then even when you're looking at that customer's feedback, again, we have to weigh it, because we might have one customer who says something. But if we start finding a bunch of customers who are talking about this, then tactically we need to figure out how are we going to reach that person. So to answer your question, I don't know that it enters as much into the vision part as it does into the execution part. That's just my opinion.
Yeah, definitely see where you're going with that, and I agree. Here, we have a couple people. I'm going to try and merge some of these questions together because they're along the same lines. In the data-driven world that we find ourselves in now, with how do you see leaders using data-driven methodologies to either minimize risk and or help with shaping like the long-term company vision?
Well, there is definitely, yes, a huge advantage to AI that it can think a gazillion times faster than the rest of us. So that is beneficial, particularly with data. And data, we have data miners. I mean, that's all they do is just mine the data, which is of great value in a certain sense. We have to, while the data can show us some trends, it can show us some patterns and whatnot. When we're talking about working with people, we need to be cautious and understand the limitations of the data, because at the end of the day, we're not engaging data. When you're selling parts, when you're on the phone talking to somebody, you're talking to a human being who has thoughts and emotions and expectations, and we need to be able to communicate on that level. The data might inform it, but it's not the data who answers the phone. It's you who answers the phone. So the word there I would say is just think about, and this might vary from one company to the next, think about what framework are we going to put data in? Because we're most likely not going to let data just run the house, just run the tables. Because we're not robots yet. We're still people.
Yeah. Data really is a powerful tool for us to kind of execute these leadership plans that we put in place through our strategic planning in collaboration with our goals to engage our people and productivity. In terms of managing your employees, we have another question here from Chris. What proactive leadership strategies can help with employee resistance or minimizing resistance?
Yeah, that is that's a regular part of because we're thinking, right? People are thinking they have ideas. We run into that opposition. So how do we be proactive about that? A couple things that I would suggest. And it goes back to that knowing our people. If we know our people or are getting to know our people, we might have a better understanding of that, what we call resistance that's coming, or that opposition. And it actually might not be as much opposition as we think, as it might be someone trying to be true to what's important to them or valuable. And so if we can engage them and in a sense validate them, which does not mean that we're agreeing with their idea. No, I don't think you should do this. I think you should do that. But validating them that they're a thinker, that their opinion matters. We can understand why they would think that way. If we can do that, it oftentimes it'll warm the person up to being able to have a conversation, even though the two of you don't agree. So in other words, proactively, I would say, do you know your people? And do you know how they think?
Great answer. Here we have a question from Alex. Brett, with your experience in speaking with various different companies, do you have any insight on key challenges organizations might face with comparing R&D investment with their long-term vision?
Wow, those are two good pieces that actually go together. You think about companies like Blockbuster, Kmart, nobody's going to buy their stuff online. We're not doing that, right? And they're not around anymore. So, how do you balance those two? I think R&D is probably in many ways driven by the vision. Remember, the vision is the future. So in 30 years from now, 50 years from now, we still want to be here. If we still want to be here, what do we need to be researching right now? What do we need to be focusing on right now that's not in existence? And how can we get the best team of thinkers on that? Now, the challenge comes, as it always is in any business, is money. How much money are we going to throw at R&D, and how much money are we going to throw at marketing and our salespeople? And so those are challenging leadership questions. But the two of those, vision and R&D, they're not enemies. They really should be synthesized. They should be friends.
Awesome. Yeah, I agree with that. With leaders facing challenges in their organization, how do you feel that leaders can balance short-term performance goals with long-term strategic growth?
Well, one of the ways I would approach that first is I would ask, what do I want to accomplish with these short-term goals, for example? Are we having a cash flow problem, and for the next 3 months nobody spends nothing and whatever? Those short-term goals, they might be, now we're going back to developing our people, those short-term goals might be a tool we're using to develop skill and competence in some leaders who are going to take us into the next chapter of our company. That's long-term growth. So the short term is very strategically designed to develop the future. The short-term goals, sometimes they're short-term fires and they just attract our attention. We can forget about the long-term vision. So we've got to be cautious there, that we keep our eye on the far horizon there, but we live right here today. And so again, I think I don't think that those two things are adversaries. I don't think we should view them as adversaries, but I do think we have to answer the question, why are we doing these short-term goals?
Yeah, it's a very good question to ask yourself, evaluating those two sides of that same coin. Couple more questions here. Another from Alex. How can leaders ensure successful implementation of emerging technologies, in your opinion?
Well, it's interesting. In our franchise, we have all four of the main demographics represented. Like we have the baby boomers, we have the Gen Zs, the Gen Xs, the millennials. They're all in our franchise. And I would suspect that in many cases, the people on the call here are in companies just like that. And so now we bring this idea, well, how do I introduce technology? And for some, and this is a generalization, but some of the younger folks, not a problem. Just pick it up immediately. My experience has been when I'm working with older folks, and I'd have to include myself in that because I'm older, but there's some fear. There's a lack of skill, but unfortunately, fear, what do people think of me, clouds or impedes that person's ability to learn. Because it's not like they're dumb, they're smart. They just don't know how to do cut and paste on an Excel spreadsheet, but they could be taught it. You won't get that person's ear if they're thinking the whole time that you're judging them as old and outdated. So if we're talking about introducing technology and we want to know the other person, then we probably have to tailor or customize our approach that shows respect for that other person and understanding for that other person, depending on which demographic it's coming from. Because here's the other side. I know plenty of people. I mean, I'm not naturally this way, but I've learned how to use all this technology, and I know plenty of people my age who do great with it. It's just that it might take a little bit longer or a different approach.
Yeah, it kind of goes along with what you were saying about knowing your people, knowing how they work, and that goes with managing up or down or anywhere throughout an organization. So unless we have any other questions, we have one more here that would be great to end on now that it's 2:30. We have a question here from Dan LaRue, Brett, who you know quite well.
Dan, what's going on, buddy?
He says, and I agree with him, you've done an amazing job facilitating the professional development program classes over the last 3 years. What's your biggest takeaway for the future leaders of the automotive industry, a lot of whom are in here today?
I would answer that with a twofold answer, and one is to never forget that the automotive industry is not so dramatically unique that it requires only a special bit of hidden tools to operate in. It is absolutely unique. I love it. You know, it's different than technology in some ways, but at the end of the day, though, it's still leadership, it's still structure, it's still passion, it's still vision. And the thing is, it's in some cases, folks on this call, you know, they're in the automotive industry now, and in 15 years from now, they might be in the construction industry. But what will remain the same is dealing with people. So the second takeaway I would say, and this is why the leadership courses I believe are so helpful, and people have said this back to us, is the feedback we've gotten is, it's helped me to learn to be confident and to relate to all kinds of people. And when we're talking about leadership, we've got to be able to relate to people.
100%. Well,
Dallas,
we're about it.
I'm going to throw up just, if I may, I'd love to connect with anybody out there, LinkedIn, whatever the case may be. If we can serve you in any way at Dale Carnegie, and just as you've been alluded to, Dallas, I hope to see a bunch of you in the spring with the PDP. I think if you like this today, then spread this out over several days and lots of engagement, and that'll give you an idea of what it's like.
Absolutely. And for those of you still with us, apply today. Applications are open for one or both of our professional development programs in conjunction with Dale Carnegie. We have 2 programs. One is the individual communications course. That's a 2-day course. It'll be May 5th and 6th of this year. And there's also the new team leadership development course, which will be a 3-day course from May 7th through the 9th. But thank you, Brett, for your time and coming out and talking with all of us. We sure do appreciate it. And thank you for everybody who came out and attended. It's awesome to put these on. And thank you for Jonathan for the intro and setting all this up. From Jonathan, I will be taking over as the chair of this program. So it's great to be here with everybody.
Dallas, I'm going to stay on the call for a few minutes after the room empties.
Yep.
Nice job, Dallas.
Thank you.
Round of applause from Denise.
Great job, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you all. Denise and Jericho, will this be on the YouTube channel post, or what happens with the recording?
Yeah, so it usually takes about like 30 minutes for this to download. So once it downloads, I'll go ahead and put a request in for our digital team to get this uploaded to YouTube. And then I'll go ahead and reply to one of our email threads that we were communicating with the link to the video and then a link to the playlist that the video will live in.
Awesome.
Jericho, can you include me in that link, please?
Yeah, no worries.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll respond to the email thread that we're all on.
I got to
All right,
run, but
guys.
great job, everybody.
Yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and end the meeting right here then too.
Thanks,
All
y'all.
right.
Appreciate it.
Cool. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.